All right, special overtime with lit versus genre. Jeff, what are your extra thoughts about the best nephew in the
This is
whole universe?
our first overtime. Owen edition. I don't think we're going to go that long in overtime. I was going to say that to what we were discussing, that having the Owen story, I think it does two things, right? It does explain Tom's time with them, right? Whether we like the explanation or not, right? It is meant to show like why he'd stick around with them, right? And then two, then why he, in the moment when his hand is sort of forced, he's gotten a choice, kind of, he sacrifices himself. So it does both those things, right? Whereas if he just sacrifices himself, I mean, thinking about it, he could have a whole myriad of motivations, right? Like he could have
Hmm.
been contracted to protect these boys, and that's why he went to the town, right? Like there could have been many a reason he could have been a dark friend, right? Or like some third faction, right? That's in between the Aes Sedai and this. So there are a lot of reasons. I think that if you did have him just go in without this story, right? If he's just like, I've got my reasons, boy, I do what I do, whatever, right? Or maybe Matt never asks. I think at some point there would be an explanation, right? Somewhere in the narrative there would have to be, yeah, that someone we learn from someone that was friends with this guy or something, who he was and why he did what he did. Otherwise, he would just be this martyr throughout the whole story, which I guess could work. But what are your thoughts? Were you thinking if he does kill himself without this paragraph, would you expect an explanation at some point?
No, your job as the writer is to explain that through the relationships and through the things that have brought the character up to that point. Not to, right before it happens, give like a pat explanation. So, like, think for example, why does Han Solo turn around with the Millennium Falcon and save Luke at the end of Star Wars, even though he's got his money and he's already said, I'm a scoundrel, I'm going off, I'm leaving. You don't get it explained to you. You just know, oh, he just has a relationship now with these people, and this has now affected his decision making. And so he makes a decision that's not his character, that's contrary to his character, everything we've been told over and over again about his character. And you buy it because you've seen it. You've seen the reason why. You're not told. You've seen it in what's happening. So like I don't know why Tom's there to begin with. That's always a
Right.
problem.
I was going to say that can't work here
That's always a
because of,
problem because I don't know why he's there to begin with. Okay, but it's not going to make me any happier to have this like pat explanation right before he dies. That doesn't make me happier about it. Like you can engineer some other reason he's there, and like then through the narrative you'll be like, oh well, he has actually built a relationship with these boys and now has some some care for these boys, and then
so it's
that would
really
explain like what he does. Or just don't kill him. Like why does he have, that was the other question I kind of had here, like why
right,
does Tom have to die here? What is that really doing
right.
for me? It's not doing a ton.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's the time, right? Yeah, because I mean you answered it, but I was gonna say real quick, just to make sure the whole thing's said for there, like allowed for record, is that yeah, I think sure, I totally get the Han Solo example. It does feel very appropriate in a lot of ways, but I think Han Solo's involvement with them throughout like made sense. Like he was making money, like there was a
Mm-hmm.
reason he was involved, and then it like edged into something that he didn't really need to be doing and he started doing for his like his reasons because of his care for them, right? Whereas here we don't have any good reason at all. Tom's running away with them. It's like, why are you putting yourself in danger? This is ridiculous. And so yeah, to your point though, of course, as you said, that ship has sort of just sailed and you feel there's no way to fix that, so we could at least fix this moment, right?
Or I
um,
mean, no, I mean like
I mean, at this chapter we can't fix that
yeah,
old,
yeah,
old
you
problem.
can't retroactively really fix that.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
what I mean.
think. Or I mean, just immediately from square one, they're all in the barn. They're about to go on this journey,
Mm.
and like they're like, wait, why are you coming? Instead of just saying, it's the pattern now, everybody,
Right.
ask him. And why doesn't he just say here, like, look, lady, I don't trust you because your
Mhm.
kind killed my nephew, and I'm gonna look after these kids. Why
Yeah,
not just do that right away? I don't know like what you're losing by that. I feel like I understand him better now, and I understand like a whole lot more of the rest that happens in the rest of the journey from that now, and I will like him more
yeah.
now.
I mean, I think there's a lot of ways we could talk about, quote unquote fixing if it is agreed as a problem, what happened in the past, right? I think that particular one is tough because you then would the Aes Sedai let him come along if he
Well,
could
she's
feel that
got
she's
to.
going
It's the
against it.
pattern now.
Well, we took that part of the speech out, remember? So in our editing. So, but I think in terms of right now, I was just saying that I want to make sure that we are on the same page. That basically, uh, in this moment, you're saying we can't fix that old moment in a satisfying way. And so, what I think, whether I agree with that or not, I think what's fascinating to talk about this specific moment is the time, right? I think it's the fact that we get this explanation and then death so close,
Mm-hmm.
right? If this had been more spread out, I think it wouldn't perhaps be as glaring as it seems to be.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean
Right,
that was the first thought I had was that like kind of cliche
right.
moment in a movie where you find out like about the
Hmm.
minor character's wife and kid or something back on the farm or something. You're like, oh, you're marked for death. You're clearly
Exactly,
dying.
exactly.
So yeah, yeah, yeah.
What about the fact that it's kept open-ended?
Well, I don't know. That was the thing I was saying in the podcast. Now I feel like I'm reading this without spoilers, but there's comments and almost like people
Right,
can't help in the comments not sort
sure.
of talking about what they already know about the books. And I don't mean to like pick on anybody for that. I think
No,
it's
no.
inevitable. You're going to, if you're interacting or talking about this thing that you
Right,
know really well, you're going to like naturally, kind of allude to things that are happening later.
sure,
So
sure.
like when I got to that part, I think I would because Matt even says doesn't Matt even say something about like we didn't see him die necessarily? Am I making that up in my head?
No, I feel that did happen.
I feel like Matt
Um,
even said something leaving it
oh,
open.
well, it was, yeah,
Where is it? So
yeah,
run,
it's
run.
right.
It's got to be after all these runs. Um, there'd be no one to turn. Oh, Tom, Matt Singer behind him. Oh, because he
Oh
says
no, they
because Rand says something about oh, you also think Egwene and everybody else is dead.
right.
You think Egwene and Moraine and the rest are dead too. If they're dead, why are the Mysteries still
No,
hunting
he
them?
says it. He says it like he's dead. He does.
Oh, right.
Maybe
He's
they're
dead.
alive
You
but gone.
saw, you heard.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
So
all
it's.
right.
I mean, it's pretty clear cut. I mean, it's
You
pretty.
saw
Yeah.
blood and ashes. Did we see blood and ashes though? So
Oh, blood Nash is just a swear that he
yeah,
uses.
right. Run. The air
Yeah.
is steering blue. Tom began to scream. Even in the scream, he managed
Mm,
run. They
right.
obeyed. The
Right.
screams pursued him, and then we don't see him anymore. And even this
Hmm.
was like Tom crashed into the mirror jaw before the black blade was half drawn.
Hmm.
So this is the mirror jaw drawing a sword, but it's not drawn.
Right.
They both went down in a thrashing heap.
Hmm.
People flee, run, he screams, and so you get
Right.
the screaming, but that's not like hyper clear cut, right?
No, it's not. It's not. But then you got the characters saying that it is,
Right.
basically. So that's kind of what I would talk about, like how open-ended is it, really, right? Because it is in terms of the visuals of what we get to see as readers. But then in terms of the characters, it's like done, right?
Well, me growing up on comic books, I know no body, no death. And sometimes, even when there is a body, no death. So I
Right.
would probably still be holding like a little bit, like, oh,
Sure.
maybe Tom's gonna pop up, randomly later, and he somehow made his way out of this. Um,
Right.
but then because of kind of comments and stuff, I feel like that's not happening. I think if I was just reading it myself, I would be like, yeah, I bet Tom's gonna pop up in like
Right.
chapter 57 or something. It's
And
just,
then
oh,
and
guess what,
then
everybody? I made it out.
and then does that change this moment, right? Because like in this moment of, oh, I finally learned your secret, and then you die, right?
Hmm.
And then even if he was to come back later, that's not changing the way a reader would feel right now, even with the potential of you being like, yeah, we might see him in chapter 56, right?
Yeah.
Um, doesn't change anything. I do wonder too, again, when this had been done, was this trope all over the place, right? Like, we've talked before about when you read the original and you're like, oh, it's just a trope. And it's like, wait, did this show create the trope? But I
Yeah.
think we can both agree it's not a good trope either
Yeah,
way.
I would say
Like,
like the first time this trope happened, it was bad. Right?
right,
Like,
that's how I was leading into. It's like
yeah.
it's not a good thing to do to like try to make someone care like right at the end
Yeah.
um, about something. And it is a question of like, why not the previous chapter? Like why not on the boats? Why not,
Mm-hmm.
especially with Matt being so distrustful, right? I think
Yeah.
it felt right for Matt to ask the question because he is so. But of course, they were stuck on the boat together. But it could still be a question of why have you been with us this long, right? So yeah, it
Yeah.
is. I think the major problem is just other characters not wondering as much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like Tom can have his reasons; he doesn't have to say, but the other characters aren't pushing him for that sooner.
Yeah, I
Why?
mean, I
Yeah.
felt the pattern thing was very hand wavy back when it happened in the barn.
Sure,
Like
sure.
just convenient and like, oh, that this thing it hasn't been used that much since, but my fear, I think I
Mm,
said in that video, was like now you have this magic wand that you can just
right,
wave over any character decision that you don't want to have to justify. Right? And
right.
like that's why it felt kind of whack to me for her to say that. Um, but like, let's say in the barn again, he just comes out with it. This is why I want to go with you
Mm,
because they're all like, "What the heck, man? Why would
yeah,
you want to do this? We're gonna be hunted by Trollocs." And he's like, "This is why." And yeah, and then establish that like I think that even establishes the inner character conflicts that he kind of hints at all the time anyway between everybody. Like if you already
mm,
know Aes Sedai killed Tom's nephew, well then that's a big source of tension with our traveling group right here, right? But and then like so why does Marina Land let him go? Well, Maraine's wise wizard lady. Like she could kind of see like
mm.
okay, yeah, this guy hates me, but whatever, I can handle myself and he would be somebody who would be also laying his life down potentially for these
Right,
boys, which is exactly what I need right now. And cold
right.
calculating Moraine would go, well, yeah, that's serving me, that's helping me, so I'll let this happen. And it just like I think again by being straightforward, and I think I've run up, against a lot of people in the comments about this, but by revealing more, not hiding so much, you make the story richer than by like saving it to spring it on people later on.
Yeah, I think since we talked about magic before, I feel like this ties to the magic conversation. I think some people want some of that mystery, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like we were talking about, sort of the mystery of like they could have answered the question of, oh, White Bridge was made by Aes Sedai, right? Then we
Mm-hmm.
know it's done, right? Whereas if with the unknown, it's like, huh, and we get to kind of spin with that a little bit. So yeah, I think it can be tough to know what are the things to leave a little bit that people can spin on, whether it's a bridge or a person's motivation, and what is better to reveal.
But
I think,
I think a bridge is, yeah, leave that a mystery all day long. I don't care about that. That's fine. Like, but the character's motivation, the thing that like allows me to connect with the character, no, I don't like it. And I know it's a big thing. I know people love the
oh, it's a
reveals and
big
like,
thing.
oh, this
Yeah.
character was good the whole time, now they're bad. Oh, surprise. And like all this, but I just find that very unfulfilling. just on a general level. Do I
It is
dislike all
pretty
twists?
common.
I know, but I think it's bad.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, it is relatively common. I mean, there are plenty of things where people do just come out and say what they want. I think again for me, the pattern part is fine because it's Moraine saying pattern. She believes in the pattern. Like you said, she's a
Hmm.
wise wizard. Maybe she predicts something like this, which does honestly pan out exactly the way she needs,
Hmm.
as you said, with him sacrificing himself so the boys can live. Um, Again, I think for me is that even if she believes in the pattern, especially because the boys are so anti Aes Sedai, right?
Hmm.
And they don't seem to worship the pattern. They don't seem to be using the phrase "it's all part of the pattern," right? That they would still wonder why this guy is with them.
Yeah.
Not initially, perhaps, because they're just trying to freaking survive, right? I'm being
Right.
chased by a monster. I
Right.
don't have time to think about it right now. But
Right.
again, if you're being chased by a monster, doesn't make you wonder why would someone else be willing to be
Right.
chased
Right.
by monsters, right?
Right.
So I think for me that's the escalation. And I remember before you asked me like what's something in like a narrative that you let go? Like what's I think you even sent an email around to like, when we were sending emails about stories and stuff, like what's a plot hole you'd let go like you didn't
Mm.
worry you, right?
Hmm.
And I think like this is an example. Like if we take a hard lens to it, sure, I'd want more. I think from Rand, honestly,
Hmm.
here as a character. Even if he is supposed to be, sort of something that's we're as readers experiencing this world through, because I do think that would be a relatively common question. But yeah, this does feel purposeful, right? This does
Hmm.
feel like I'm choosing to reveal this story about Tom right before he dies, so it hits harder with the thought that that will make it hit harder, right? And I think that no, that doesn't tend to make a character's death hit harder. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
just to like say one more thing, so I can like set the comments on fire here. I think the whole reveal thing is a genre thing. It and is
Hmm.
kind of a weak genre thing. Like there is a thrill of it. Like ooh, at the end of The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis was the ghost all along, and oh, I called it or I didn't call it. And there's like a little kinetic thrill like that. Kaiser Soze was Kevin Spacey. Ooh,
Right.
and like I get there's a pleasure in that, but I think it's a very shallow pleasure. And I like yeah, can it be good? I guess it can kind of be good, but I think the danger and after I feel like after those two movies came out, like it's like everybody's trying to ring that bell, everybody's trying to hit that note like all the time and it just doesn't like it doesn't really do anything for me anymore. Even like the slight pleasure of, ooh, I called it, or ooh, that surprised
Right.
me, just doesn't feel a very deep emotional pleasure the
Mm,
way character, real, like having real inner
mm,
conflict and problems that you have to
mhm.
overcome that are clearly defined that I can understand and relate to. That feels like a much deeper pleasure to
Mhm.
me and that
So,
reveals kind of actively work against that's I guess is the other thing like I feel like it's a trade-off like if you're going like ooh I'm gonna set up stuff to be a reveal then you have to like hide stuff from your reader and that is by definition gonna keep them less engrossed in what's happening except in the guessing
mhm.
game they'll be engrossed in that but there's a cost to it I think I'm saying.
Yeah, I think readers in many cases will read or watch shows to find out the answer to that question, though, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's what
genre readers.
yeah, mysteries are based on, completely. Um, but I think you're right that it spans genre, right? Like it's a very common genre
Yeah,
thing, whether we're talking about um,
it's
romantic
very
comedies,
common.
even.
But
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
also wonder like in the truly successful things, even truly successful things that have twists, was it
Mhm.
really the twist that did it? That makes it truly successful, right? Like it does Sixth Sense work if it's not really about Haley Joel Osment and Bruce Willis and their relationship? Does it just work if
Right.
it's just like, oh, Bruce Willis was a ghost all along? I think there's like, I think people have seen things with twists and like overestimated the amount that the twist made it popular. Where I
Mm,
would argue there's so many bad twist things that people just don't give a crap about at the end when you get the twist. I mean, M. Night Shyamalan is basically just a joke at this point, you know, because it's
yeah.
always a twist. And so, like, my argument would be you guys kind of got fooled by thinking the twist was the good thing about the story, and it wasn't the good thing about the story.
Yeah, I think a twist adds. I wouldn't say that it makes a story, right?
Mm
I think a twist can create an additional experience. But this conversation has made me think of Invincible, for
hmm.
instance. Now you've read the Invincible comics, or did you watch a show? I can't remember.
I have the comics.
Okay.
I do have issue number one. Now this came out like over a decade, maybe.
Hmm.
I mean, I
Hmm.
think that was coming out in like the early 2000s when it
Right.
originally came out. So yeah, so I read a lot of that story though. I didn't have much memory of it. I watched
Hmm.
episode one of the cartoon, and I did
Yeah.
know, super spoiler warning everybody, but I did
Yeah.
know the dad was again, I'm going to say it again, super spoiler warning.
Yeah.
If you
Spoiler
do
for
not want to hear
Invincible.
Invincible spoilers, stop listening.
Yeah,
um
stop listening. Go watch Invincible. It's worth the
yeah,
watch.
but
And then come back to this.
I did know the dad was the bad guy, and I also feel
Mhm.
like in the comic that's actually held a lot longer than it
Oh,
is in the
interesting.
show. I think they just like dove right into it in the
Interesting.
show, which
Mhm.
I think is a good decision, right?
Oh,
Because
really?
and you're gonna hold this up as like, oh, a twist. Here's a good twist. By doing it at the end of episode one, is it really a twist? You didn't
Uh,
hold it that long. You're kind of putting it out there right away. It's episode number one.
the interesting thing about it is that I know people that only watch the beginning of the episode.
Mm,
They couldn't even make it through because I do think the first episode is a little rough,
yeah.
honestly, until you hit that part and it's like, oh, what am I watching? Because otherwise it just feels very, it feels like someone has no new idea. It's just like a copy of the Justice League,
Right,
right?
right,
It's like, why am I watching this cheap knockoff
right.
Justice League do things, right? So to me, that was very dangerous, honestly, that you have to have people be like who watch the whole episode and then be like, wait, watch the whole episode, right? But to your point, the reason I mentioned it is sure, yeah, I mean, it's revealed early the dad's got a bad reason, but we don't learn what that reason is. So I would say that the show heavily relies on mystery. There were definitely episodes that I only watched the next episode to finally figure out why the dad was doing what he did.
Interesting.
Um, so I do think that it can be a way to get people to read or watch your show, right? And I think that's why people might do it because I can agree that the hits, like the emotional, you know, catharsis you can feel from watching a truly great show, in whatever medium, it is generally going to be an emotional thing, not I mean, and I guess the twist reveal is an emotional experience, but I hear you about the difference between them. However, in terms of people getting to the end of your product, I feel like if you reveal everything right and people like it, cool. But if they don't, if they're like, oh, okay, well, whatever, then they can put the book down, right? Um, so I think
Well,
it
if they don't like it
allows
at the
you to,
beginning, they're not going to like it at the end. Wait, you
but
mean?
at least they read it all, right? At least they finished it.
Well,
I'm
is
just
it
saying.
better if somebody reads your whole thing and was like, "This book's terrible"? Is
I'm
that
just, I'm
better?
just,
Is that a
I-
better
I'm
outcome?
just saying it's a way to get people to stay invested. And then maybe even if they don't like the twist reveal, there was something else along the way that they ended up enjoying.
I need
So,
another example because I don't think the Invincible example is good, and here's why. I don't
okay.
think it's interesting that there's some reason why the dad is bad. In fact, I don't remember it. I don't
Hmm.
care. What's interesting about that is that it's a problem for your protagonist. It is a big problem. There's going to be implications in the family. in the emotional bonds between people. It's a betrayal. These are the things that are interesting about it.
Yeah, but I mean, I was literally interested in his reason. I mean, again, different readers for different things, but I'm just pointing out that it can be a reason why people continue to read or watch something. So I think that's another reason why you see it
I think
viewed
those
as so
other reasons are
differently.
stronger. And I think, like, for more people, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think for more people, if you get hooked by that end, it's because, like, oh shit, how is the kid going to deal with this? What is this going to result in? What are the consequences of
Sure.
this? More than, like, oh, why is he acting that way?
Well, the kid's gonna have the same question though, like, why did you do
Well,
this,
sure. I
right?
mean, you have to have a reason, but what's compelling about it is the implications for the characters.
Well, I mean, again, we can't just say what's blanket compelling because I'm
I
literally
mean,
telling you another reason why it was compelling.
well,
I mean,
I guess you need to sell me a little bit more on what is compelling about that. Like, literally, if there's just a
yeah.
question.
Well, no, I mean, obviously it's a big question because he did something very extreme. I'm just saying that mysteries can be a reason why people keep going. That's all.
I
And I'm
mean,
not saying it's a better reason for people to keep going. I'm
I
just saying
accept
that
it's
it
a
can be
reason to
a
keep
reason.
going, and I'm saying it's a
Right.
worse reason.
Well, sure, but if you could have two reasons for people to keep going, I think that's what a lot of people go for. Seriously, though,
And I think what happens a lot is that one
yeah,
interferes with the other actively. And I think
it
that's
could.
happening here in this novel that we're reading right now. That one
I,
is the instinct to lean so heavily on one interferes with the other.
I think it certainly could. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that, but I think people are trying to scattershot, like maybe I can get you with, being interested in the world. Maybe I can get you interested in the characters. Maybe I can get you interested in the conflict of these boys being chased. And maybe I can get you interested in like, why are these people doing what they're doing? And it's a mix, right? Like if one doesn't get you, something else will. So they're trying to give you as many reasons to want to keep going, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I hear you. I can understand that one could actively conflict with the other, but I think that's the rationale of why you see a lot of people using it.
And I also think like something like again, I guess we're having an argument on like
Mhm.
what leads to more popularity to more people, right? And
Mhm.
I think like as a broad entertainment thing, I will be interested to see how they do Wheel of Time because to
Yeah.
me Game of Thrones seems to have a ton of innate superiority to this in terms of
Mm.
translation to television.
Oh yeah.
One, I think because it's a little racier in the first
Yeah.
place, like that was going
Oh yeah.
to
So,
push
yeah.
against fantasy things that people like kind of for most of our lives have like kind
Mhm.
of mocked or been turned off by. But I also think like that show does do a good job of going like, look, here's the problems like
Mhm.
laid out for you, easy to understand, so that you as a general audience member that doesn't give a flying fuck about fantasy will be engrossed in, right?
Mhm.
And like what don't we know? There's like what's so kind of interesting about that whole at least first book and the series of what I remember is that there's all this intrigue, there's all these lies
Mhm.
and betrayals and backstabbings. But like because you're checking in with all the characters and you know what sides they're on, you kind of have not all of the information, but you have a lot of the information, and
You do have a lot of it.
you
Yeah.
know everybody's problems very clearly. Like like why it kind of what Ned's big problem is. He now has to be the hand for this king and this nest of vipers, and he knows like the danger behind
Mhm.
that, but he's got the duty, and he's so you understand his problem. You understand the brother and sister's problem, and that
Mhm.
and you know that they pushed the kid out the window, and I think it's key that like the audience knows all of this and it actually works a lot better, like, and more people connect to it because of that.
Yeah, no, I think they're gonna actually be pulling sort of different audiences, like to a
Mm,
degree.
mm.
And what I mean by that is, as has been said, Game of Thrones, heavy sex, right? Big violence, right? And yeah, it's just people sort of being terrible to each other, right? So that's going to create a lot of problems. So there's problems, and I do also agree with you that because we get to see, from other POVs, we know the cause of certain problems,
Mm,
whereas in this one, more mysterious, right?
mm.
What I think that other show lacked is it's billed as a fantasy show. It's barely a fantasy show. It's like almost historical fiction in that, especially with the budget. We saw dire wolves like 3 times or something because they had to like kill them off because they didn't have the budget to show them. So like I
Well,
feel as
does
if
this show have a bigger budget?
well, that's something that I'm curious to see what they're going to spend their budget on and if they're going to be spending more budget on the magical side of things. Because this show actually has magic in it as like a quasi-normal course. We're not seeing a ton of it here, but I think I can say without many spoilers that within the scope of the more than dozen books, we get a lot of magic going on.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like
No,
this
I don't feel like
show.
anything I've read in here particularly is gonna be that
Mhm.
hard to put on the screen
No,
though. Like
nothing yet. The Trollocs.
oddly making slightly bigger wolves is much harder than
Apparently.
like anything that
I
we
know,
see
right?
on this.
Oh my goodness. So, I think that this is going to appeal. One, I also know a lot of people that didn't watch Game of Thrones. Well, not a lot, but some people that didn't watch Game of
Well,
Thrones because of this
hold on
fantasy.
though, hold on. If our
Yeah.
argument is what grabs a bigger audience,
Oh, it's
you
definitely Game of Thrones.
can't grab a bigger audience than Game of Thrones. That was
Oh, no, no,
the
no, no.
most successful show, like
Completely. No, no,
of all
I agree.
time, maybe. So, like, what?
Was it?
I
Is
mean,
it?
I
It
think
might
in
be. You might
ratings
be right.
wise,
Mhm.
it
And then what a fall.
no,
What a fall from
indeed,
grace.
indeed. Maybe
Okay, the whole
because
thing
they did
about
a
the fall.
twist. I mean, maybe that was the problem with
Oh
the
my goodness.
end.
Now
Um,
we're gonna revisit
but
that. Oh, so bad. It's so bad. Anyway, no, I don't think this. I think it's got a hope of being close to as big because there is this boom of fantasy shows and
mhm.
people from Game of Thrones want a show to watch, right? I think that it could draw in some people that maybe weren't pulled in by the other show because of a lack of as much sex. People that did not like that about Game of Thrones. I think those that wanted more magic out of a show will get that with this. So that's what I mean about I think it will appeal to some different people. I know there's so many audience members who watch Game of Thrones and then never they never picked up another fantasy book. Maybe they watched another fantasy show, maybe Witcher or something. And that's, it. So yeah, this is not the low fantasy, the gritty fantasy that
Mhm.
Game of Thrones embodied. So you are going to be pulling from a slightly different wedge of humanity. And I'm very curious to see how it will do. I'm hoping that it will not just
Mhm.
completely suck. So we'll see. But yeah, no, I would think that Game of Thrones definitely will probably stay on top because I think more people, non-fantasy fans, would like a show that doesn't have fantasy in it. So
I
there we
mean,
go.
I feel like that is a simplistic way to put it. I think that show and the books themselves did a lot that is more broadly appealing because
I would agree.
my argument is not that tone down the fantasy or whatever, but my argument is that if you have clear character motivations, clear problems that they're dealing with that you can relate to, and you're interested in the consequences of those, that's going to hit more deeply and get people more into your thing than if you're like, oh, here's a question you don't have the answer to.
Let me put this to you then. Do you think that's why they're focusing on Moraine? Because she has a clear problem.
I mean, yeah, I'm really kind of interested in how much of this kind of mystery, these kids
I think
don't know what's going on, sort of
it's gets stripped
structure
away.
that they
Mhm.
keep. I am very interested in that. And I
What
like,
if they just strip that away? Like, what if we get
right.
scenes of Moraine and Lan talking about what's going on, right?
Yeah,
Because Moiraine's got the problem of like keeping them alive against the forces of darkness,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And if that's like, and I don't know, you've read the rest of the book, so you kind of know the rest of the world. But I think a thing
Sure.
that he's doing, I kind of had two minds about it when I was reading that big exposition bit. I was like, dang, like there's this whole other story going on, and getting it secondhand isn't very fulfilling. Like again, show don't
Mm,
tell sort of idea that like, oh, wouldn't it be cool? I mean, we're jumping back and forth between Perrin and Rand, but wouldn't it be
mm,
interesting if we were jumping more far afield? And I was seeing this
right.
story happening elsewhere, and like I actually had that thought when I was reading that exposition, and
Right.
so that's what made me think, oh, I bet they just do this, and
Oh,
like
no.
just go around, and it's not all just like, by you saying it's going to focus on Moraine, because the natural way to go about it, that Jordan did go about it, and I feel like it would be the natural way for a lot of reasons, is, oh, kid doesn't know what's happening, kid is
Mm,
suddenly introduced to the whole wide new world, kind
right.
of the Luke Skywalker type narrative thing,
Sure.
and that does seem hard to do in a show, and i
Mm,
i think I would be interested if they drop a lot of like the kind of mystery stuff and kind of go more for like a Game of Thrones type feel. I mean, they
I,
clearly they're gonna be like emulating it in some way. I feel like fantasy anything's gonna be just living under the shadow of that show for like a very long time.
well, hopefully something will break out and actually do it right and like finish strong.
Mm.
And by that I mean do the end right. Obviously, the beginning of Game of Thrones like just killed it. But yeah, no, I think they will. I honestly do. I think there will be more things kind of up front. And I think there'll be the mystery of, why are we being chased? But even that we sort of know the answer to, of like
Mm-hmm.
maybe one of you is the Dragon Reborn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll keep that as like we don't know which one. But I think it'll be focused more on surviving this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that'll be it. And Moraine's attempts to have them survive the journey. In terms of the Logan thing, um, part of me agrees. Part of me is like, yeah, show me that. But another part of me does like being introduced to something that's happening in a larger world, and then we eventually get to see it. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's that wait for it. But again,
Mm-hmm.
that's a total fantasy reader thing. Like that's what a lot
Yeah.
of fantasy readers like. Like, hey, tell me something that then I got to work to get to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like make
Mm-hmm.
me feel the journey. So then when I finally do see it, it's like I've earned it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's appealing to two completely different types of readers and something that Game of Thrones does not do a lot of with its structure. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
and I think that's different than reveal as well. Like you've kind
Sure,
of been
sure.
told what you
Hmm.
should be anticipating or interested in that case. So
Yeah.
I get that appeal.
And I love that shit. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I would love both, right? I do want the fan fiction of they go to Ilion and Tom competes in the American Idol agreement. I'm sure it's out
Yes.
there somewhere. I'm sure
Yes.
somebody wrote it. Somebody wrote that fan fiction. I'm sure. Well, I think we have
Oh my
talked through
goodness.
this one, but I thought it was going to be like 5 minutes. It was not. But I do enjoy these comparisons to Game of Thrones, and again, I think we're reading this at a very exciting time where we get to make these predictions and we get to see how they pan out
Yeah.
and what choices they make. And I like that we've got very specific things we're talking about that we can point to, because whether you agree or not, I think everyone now has in their lexicon, okay, we're talking about like, are you going to go for revealed motivations and like just the emotional hits of that? Or are you going to try to hold stuff back and then reveal it? And when it is it satisfying? And really seeing how much of this show does it, we can straight measure that. That's easy.
That's kind of
And I think
interesting.
it's going to be it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
For
I'm looking forward to
science.
it.
For science.
Yeah, for science. Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
We'll see you next time, everybody.
See you then.